Good evening, guys. As we talked before in chapter 10 about positive messages, today we're gonna talk about negative messages in chapter 11 from different dimensions. So let's get started with learning objectives. So the first object is to create subject lines for negative messages. The second one, apply strategies for informative and positive messages organization. The third one, assess legal implication with message, especially negative ones. The fourth, to identify situation for buffer use. The fifth one is to list common kinds of negative messages. And finally, apply strategies for negative message analysis. Okay. So in negative message, the basic information is negative. So we expect the reader to be disappointed or angry. So from this angle, we have kind of negative expectation about reader. It could be disappointed or angry. Few people, like to give bad news. And even fewer people like to get it, but negative message are common in business. So by natural, you can give or you can deliver negative message in business domain. So how we present negatives and what we write or say can affect how audiences respond to our message, as well as how they will view us and our organization. So here, negative messages include rejection and refusal, policy changes, okay, that don't benefit customer, insulting or intrusive request, negative performance appraisal, and finally, product recalls. So here, at this point, we can say a negative message always has several purposes. Okay, so we have primary purposes and secondary purposes. So let's get started with primary purposes. So primary purposes here, okay, to give the reader bad news, first of all. The second one, to have the reader read, understand, and accept, to make him or her accept the message. The third one, to maintain as much goodwill as possible. So the primary purposes is focusing about how to give the reader bad news and how to make the reader accept the message. And third, how to maintain as much goodwill as possible. Because a negative message differs from a positive message, as we talked before in the previous chapter. First of all, the basic information is focusing on negative, okay? So you can see the difference between positive and negative. So basically here, a negative message is focusing on negative. However, the bad news may still be given to audience while maintaining goodwill. So I can proceed or I can communicate with readers by giving them a bad news, but at the same time, I have to maintain a goodwill relation. Okay, so that's why we have to talk about secondary purposes. Secondary purposes, first of all, how to build a good image of the writer. How to build a good image of the writer organization. How to reduce or eliminate future correspondence on the same subject. Okay, so even with the negative message, you want to maintain a good image. You have to make a good image about yourself, about your organization, and reduce future correspondence on the same subject. Okay. So here, even when it's not possible to make the reader happy with the news, we must convey, or we still want readers to feel that they have been taken seriously, our decision is fair and reasonable, and third, if they were in our shoes, they would make the same decision. So it means that we don't have another option to deliver to the reader. So we have to make the readers feel that this is an important issue and our decision is logical, is reasonable, is fair, and even the reader in our shoes, okay, he will not able to make another decision except what we make it. Okay, so let's move to another let's move to the other slide. And here there is a questions, what's the best subject line for a negative message? Okay, so here we have two options, or we have two alternatives. Okay, the first one, when you give bad news to superiors, use a subject line that focus on solving the problem. Okay, the second one, when you write to peers and subordinates, put the topic in the subject line. Okay, so let's say that letters don't require subject line. Yeah, so omit a subject line in negative letters unless you think readers may ignore or what they think is a routine message. So when you give a bad news to superiors, use subject line that focus on solving the problem. When you write to peers or subordinates, put the topic but not your action on it in the subject line. Okay, so here when you give bad news to superior, use a subject line that focus on solving the problem. So here the subject, okay, improving our subscription letter. Okay, but here when you write to peers and subordinates, here we talked about differences. Okay, when you want to deliver or when you want to give a bad news to superior, it's completely different when you give bad news to peers or subordinates. So here we have to focus on the subjects. For example, status of conversion table program. Okay, fine. So we have this an important question. How should I organize negative message? Okay. Okay, let's say that the message depends on your purposes and depend on your audiences. Okay, so you have to carefully choose the pattern based on the situation. So letters, let's say letters to people outside your organization should be indirect to build goodwill. So when the message, or sorry, when the letters is going outside your organization, you have to be careful and you have to make it indirect way. Why? To build a goodwill. Okay, so when you write to superiors, okay, you need to propose a solution, not just report a problem. So don't make yourself as a reporter or a transformer, okay? So you have to give a solution. You have to give a proposed solution to your superior when you write about an issue or an important problem. But the third case, when you write to peers and subordinates, try to get their input in dealing with negative situation. Okay. So we have, okay, the following patterns help writer maintain goodwill. This is an important issue, okay? Okay, so when you want to give bad news to customers, other people, customers and other people, they are outsiders or they are outside from your organization. So you have to give the reason for refusal before the refusal itself. When you have a reason that reader will understand and accept. Please focus with me about this, an important point. So give the reason for the refusal before the refusal itself. When you have a reason that readers will understand and accept, okay, a good reason prepares the reader to expect the refusal. Okay, so let's move to the second point. Give the negative just once clearly, make it necessary to say no a second time. Okay. Present an alternative or compromise if one is available. Okay. So where possible, present an alternative because negative message limit the reader freedom. He or she, the reader, may assert their freedom in some other way called psychological reactives. And an alternative allows the reader freedom without hurting you. Okay. So here at third point, present an alternative or compromise. So an alternative not only give readers another way to get what they want, but also suggest that you care about your readers and you trying to help them to solve their problems. Okay, so the fourth point here end with a positive forward-looking statement. Okay. Okay, here at this figure 11.1, it shows that how to organize a negative letter. Given a reason, refusal, alternative, goodwill, ending. So we're gonna start step by step about this figure. Okay, so let's start with the first one, reasons. Reasons make the reason for refusal clear and convincing. So here, for example, if the reader says, I don't care if my bills are slow and impersonal, will the company let the reader keep the card? No. The real reason for negative is that the bank franchise allows it to have cardholders only in a given geographical region. Okay. So here, what's my term? Don't hide behind company policy. Readers will assume the policy is designed to benefit you at their expense. If possible, show how the reader benefits from the policy. If they don't benefit, don't mention the policy at all. No need to mention about the policy. Don't talk about your policy at all, your company policy, I mean. Okay. Okay. Now we need to talk about how we're still in the same topic, okay? Talking about how should I organize negative message, de-emphasize the refusal. Okay, how? By putting it in the same paragraph as the reason rather than in a paragraph by itself. Okay, that in this point here, sometimes you may be able to be imply the refusal rather than stating it directly. So in some cases, maybe you prefer to use implied refusal. How? I can give you an example. Okay, so look at this one, at this statement, direct refusal. Okay, here you cannot get, for example, you can give a direct refusal to the reader. You cannot get insurance for just 1 month. This is direct. Okay, you cannot get insurance for just 1 month. But if I'm using implied refusal, I can say the shortest term for an insurance policy is 6 months. Okay. So here you can see the differences between direct refusal and implied refusal when sometimes you have to use it. Okay, so be sure that implication is crystal clear. Any message can be misunderstood, okay? But an optimistic or desperate reader is particularly unlikely to understand a negative message, okay? So desperate, for example, when the reader is feeling depression or desperate reader, okay, there is a chance to make the reader, let's say, or make the reader misunderstood you. Okay, so maybe he will not understand a negative message as it is. So one of your purposes here in a negative message is to close the door on the subject. You don't want to have to write a second letter saying that real answer is no. Okay. Okay, so let's move to the alternative here. Okay. So giving the reader an alternative or compromise if one is available. Okay, so offer the reader another way to get what he or she wants. Suggest that you really care about the reader and about helping to meet his or her needs. The third one enables the reader to reestablish the psychological freedom you limited when you said no. Allows you to end on a positive note and to present yourself and your organization as positive, friendly, and helpful. This is what we said before about goodwill, about how to create a good image about yourself even when you deliver a negative message. Okay, so when you give an alternative here, give the readers all the information they need to act on it, but don't make the necessary steps. Let the reader decide whether to try the alternative. Okay, so negative message here limit the reader freedom. People may respond to an limitation of freedom by asserting their freedom in some other arena. Okay. Also, I need to add something about alternative. Also, an alternative allows the reader to react in a way that doesn't hurt you. By letting reader decide for themselves whether they want alternative, you allow them to reestablish their sense of psychological freedom. So about alternative, the specific alternative will vary depending on the circumstances. Okay, so as we see here in figure 11.3, okay, the company is unwilling to quote a price on an item in which can be competitive in different circumstances. The writer might offer different alternative. Okay, يعني خليني let's say this paragraph because it's very important to make it or to speak it in Arabic. Okay, so here in figure 11.3, okay, as we see here, the company is unwilling to quote a price. يعني الشركة لا ترغب في عرض السعر، تمام، وهذا السعر بتكون it's unable to be competitive، يعني غير قادر انها تنافس عليه. تمام. طيب، فبهاي الحالة or in different circumstances the writer might offer different alternatives. يعني اللي خلينا نحكي الرايتر ممكن يعطي ايش بدائل مختلفة، في حيث لو كانت الشركة لا ترغب في عرض سعر معين لايتم معينة او عنصر معينة، والسعر هذا يعني خلينا نحكي unable to be compete او الشركة غير قادر انها تنافس عليه. طيب okay, so here we have to talk about legal implication. Okay, legal implication, any message that's recorded can be supported in a legal case. Okay, negative internet posts have met with legal challenges. Think about how a reasonable person might interpret your words. Okay, so what we understood from this slide is thinking about the legal implication of what you say is particularly important in negative message. In an effort to caution bad news, writers sometimes give reasons that create legal liabilities. يعني ممكن يكون في عندك مسؤولية قانونية لما مثلا any message that's recorded can be supported in a legal case، ممكن يتم تسجيلها في قضية قانونية. Negative internet posts have met with legal challenges. So we are here talking about legal challenges from different angle. So think about how reasonable person might interpret your words. كيف ممكن يفسر شخص عاقل مثلا للكلمات أو المصطلحات اللي ممكن إيش تستخدمها. Okay. So now we are moving to a new point here. We have 2 points here. When you try to give a bad news to superiors, and the other one, when you try to give bad news to peers or subordinates. So let's start with when you give bad news to your superiors. Okay. Your superior expects you to solve minor problems by yourself. But sometimes solving a problem requires more authority. Maybe you don't have this authority, or needs more resources that you don't have it. So when you give bad news to a superior, also you have to make a recommendation, okay, a way to deal with a problem. So turn the negative message into a persuasive mode. This is very important in this case, especially when you are dealing with your superiors. Turn the negative message into a persuasive one. So how to turn a negative message into a persuasive one? Okay. First of all, you have to describe the problem. Tell what's wrong clearly, unemotionally. Second one, tell how it happened. You have to give or you have to provide a background, and you have to talk about underlying factors lead to this specific problem. So you can give more details, okay? The third one, you have to describe the options for fixing it. So if one option is clearly best, okay, you may need to discuss only one. But if the reader will think of other options, or if different people will judge the options differently, you have to describe all the options, giving their advantages and disadvantages, okay? And let them decide which option is the best. But you have to do your turn. Okay, the fourth one here, you have to recommend a solution and ask for action. Ask for approval so you can make necessary changes to fix the problem. Okay, so here from this figure 11.4, you can see summarize the pattern here. Okay, start from shared problem with your superior, and you have to give details, okay, tell how it happened. And the third, you have to give options or alternatives. And finally, you have to request for actions, ask for approval, as I said right now, ask for approval so you can to make necessary changes to fix the problem. Okay. Now we have to talk about giving bad news to peers and subordinates. Maybe it's similar to giving bad news to your superiors, okay? But there's some missing steps at this stage, okay? So when you must pass along serious bad news to peers and subordinates, you have to describe the problem, tell what's wrong clearly and emotionally, as we said before. So this is the similarity between giving bad news to your superior and subordinates or peers. The second one, you have to present an alternative or compromise if one is available, okay? An alternative, give readers another way to get what they want, and also suggest that you care about your readers and helping them meet their needs, okay? And the third one, if possible, ask for input or output. People in the audience may be able to suggest solutions, and workers who help make a decision are far more likely to accept the consequences. Okay. So here, no serious negative, for example, such as being downsized or laid off, should come as a complete surprise. Managers can prepare for possible negatives by giving full information as it becomes available. It's also possible to let the people who will be affected by a decision participate in setting the criteria. Someone who has put in the criteria for awarding cash for suggestion or returning workers is more likely to accept decision using such criteria. Some workplaces, for example, might decide to reduce everyone pay slightly rather than laying off some individuals. Okay. And here, this one, figure 11.5, related to how to organize a negative memo to peers or subordinates. So here you can see the differences. Here, shared problem, here, shared problem, but in the second here, you have to give the details, okay, tell how it happens, provide background, underlying factors, but in giving bad news to peers and subordinates, you talk directly about alternatives, okay? And the final is here, request for actions, as we said right now, ask for input and actions, okay? Fine. Okay. Here, when we talk about the memos, okay, let's say that memos, the context of communication is crucial. The reader's reaction is influenced by the following factors, okay? Okay, the first is our, here it takes a question type. Do you and the reader have a good relationship? Does the organization treat people well? Have readers been warned of possible negatives? Have readers bought into the criteria for the decision? Do communications after the negative build goodwill? Okay. Okay, now we will talk about a new point here. When should I consider using a buffer? Okay, so we have to explain what is the buffer here. Buffer is neutral or positive statement that allows you to delay the negative. Okay, again, buffer is a neutral or positive statement that allows you to delay the negative. Okay. Let's say that recent research suggests that buffers don't make reader respond more positively, and good buffers are very hard to write. However, in special situation, you may want to use a buffer. So in some situation, you have or you may use a buffer. Okay. So to be effective, a buffer must put the reader in a good frame of mind, not give the bad news, but not imply a positive answer either, and provide a natural transition to the body of the reader. Okay. So the kind of statement must often use a buffer are good news, facts, and chronology of events, references, and so on. So let's start with the first point here. Start with any good news or positive elements the letter contains, okay? So I'm trying to give some examples about this point. Okay. Start with any good news or positive elements the letter contains. For example, we can say that, okay, starting Thursday, June 26, you will have access to your money 24 hours a day at First National Bank, for example. Okay. The second one, state a fact or provide a chronology of events. Okay, you can say, for example, as a result of the new graduate due schedule determined by someone last December, subsequently endorsed by the Executive Council problem, are now asked to establish their own dues rate and to calculate the total amount of their remittance. Okay, type. The third point here, refer to enclosures in the letter. Okay, enclosed is a new sticker, for example, for your car. So you may pick up additional one in the office if needed. Please destroy old stickers bearing the signature something. So this is an example of refer to enclosure in the letter. Okay. Thank the reader for something he or she has done. Maybe you can say, thank you for scheduling appointments for me with so many senior people at First National Bank. My visit there, for example, April 14 was very informative. Okay. About the final point here, state a general principle. You can say here, for example, good drivers should pay substantially less for their auto insurance. The good driver plan was created to reward good drivers with our lowest available rates. A change in the plan effective January 1st will help keep those rates low. So from all these 5 statements, as we see, buffer are hard to write. Even if you think the reader would prefer to be let down easily, use a buffer only when you can write a good one. So as a conclusion, buffers are hard to write, okay? And use buffer only when you can write a good one. When you can write a good one. But here, okay, it's better not to use a buffer if the reader may ignore a letter with a blank first paragraph. Okay, we have 4 cases here. Okay, don't use a buffer. It's like an advice. If the reader may ignore a letter with a bland first paragraph, if the reader or the organization prefers bottom line first messages, if the reader is suspicious of the writer, if the reader will not take no for an answer. Okay. Okay, at this slide, now we will talk about what are the most common kinds of negative messages. We have 3 common kinds of negative messages. Rejections and refusals, disciplinary notes, and negative performance appraisal, layoff, and firing. So we will start with rejection and refusal. Okay. So at this point, when you refuse requests from people outside your organization, try use a buffer. Okay. So when you refuse request, لما انت ترفض مثلا اشخاص outside of your organization, try to use a buffer. Give an alternative if one is available. For example, if you are denying credit, it may still be possible for the reader to put an expensive item on layaway. You have to be focused about your politeness, okay, at this stage. Okay. Also, when you refuse requests within your organization, use your knowledge, okay, of organization culture and of the specific individual to craft your message. Okay. Let's say that let's say that we have 2 different situations when you're dealing with someone out of your organization and when you're dealing with someone inside your organization. So when you're dealing with someone outside your organization, you have to use buffer. But when you're dealing with someone inside your organization, use your knowledge of organization culture. okay? Especially when you try to craft your message. In some organization, it may appropriate to use company slogan, offer whatever help already established department can give, and refer to individual good work. Okay, so now we will talk about disciplinary notes and negative performance appraisal. Okay, so present disciplinary notes and negative performance appraisal directly with no buffer. Again, with no buffer. But when an employee violates a company rule or a company policy or fails to improve after repeated appraisal, the company may discipline the employee or build a dossier to support firing him or her. And finally, we'll talk about layoff and firing. Okay. So here at this stage, information about layoff and firing is normally delivered orally, but accompanied by a written statement explaining a severance pay or employment benefits that may be available. So the written statement should start either with a reason or with the decision itself. A buffer would not be helpful, or a buffer would not be appropriate. So if a company is okay, let's say if the company is in a financial trouble, management here needs to communicate the problem clearly along before it's necessary to lay anyone off. So sharing an information at this point is very important, and listing everyone helps in finding solution, make it possible to save some jobs. Sharing information also means that layoff notes, if they become necessary, will be formality, and they shouldn't be new information to employee. So please, before you fire someone, double check the facts, okay? And give the employee the real reason for firing, but avoid broadcast the reason to other. This is very important. It kind of make it secret between you and the employee, okay? Especially when you try to give the reason of firing, keep it between the management and, for example, and the employee. But you have to avoid broadcast the reasons to other people or all employees within the organization. Okay. Okay, allocating time and writing negative memos, it's not new for us because we did it before in a previous chapter. Okay, so here, memos denying matching funds, okay, total time is 3 hours. Planning, it takes 1 hour. For example, understand the situation, and answer the questions, think about document design, organize the message. As I said right now, we discussed this topic before in chapter 1 and chapter 5. Okay, about writing, approximately half an hour. About revising, 1 hour and a half. Read draft, for example, revise draft, ask for feedback, proof by eye, revise draft based on feedback. Maybe you need to make some editing to catch any grammatical mistakes. So here, let's move to the checklist for negative messages. Here we have different questions about checking the negative message. So we have some questions here. We can talk about it. For example, is the subject line appropriate? If a buffer is used, for example, here, does it avoid suggesting either a positive or a negative response? Is the negative information clear? For example, here, does the last paragraph avoid repeating the negative information? As we said before, no need to repeat it, just mention it once, okay, or say it once. Is tone acceptable, for example, but not cold, no arrogant either, for example. Okay, does the message use your attitude and positive emphasis? Is the style easy to read and friendly? Okay, Is the format correct? Are you using visual design? Is it free of typos, method, for example, with no mistakes? Here about the negative message here, an effective buffer, if one is appropriate, for example, make the statement clear, complete. You have to provide a good alternative, clearly presented here, adding details that you are thinking about specific organization and specific people in that organization. So we have, as I said here, we have many questions as a checklist for a negative message. Finally, I hope that I explained this chapter, negative message, easily and clearly. Please don't forget to make like and support my channel. Have a nice day. Salam.